The Harry Potter series is full of great and terrible characters alike.
Terrible, but great.
Some of these characters, however, are terrible in very different ways. So, we'd like to take this chance with you to go through these characters that we absolutely love to hate. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Wizarding World Legacy Podcast. I'm Eric.
And I'm Jasmine.
And today we're going to be discussing some of the most disliked characters within the Wizarding World franchise. But instead of doing another top 10 hated characters, we thought we'd put a little twist on it. So we're also going to be mentioning some of the redeeming qualities of each of these characters, or if we're unable to really pull a redeeming quality out of the hat for any particular characters, we may talk about how they redeem the story arc in some way. So we'll jump right in with the first truly nasty characters we get to meet on screen, the Dursleys. I'm going to let you start out. And yes, we will be looking at some notes for this because there's a lengthy list of characters. Well, there's 10 characters, but a lengthy list of attributes to go through. So I'm going to let you start with the Dursleys.
All right. So, the Dursleys, the horribly wonderful couple that Harry gets to grow up with, Vernon and Petunia. Petunia, naturally, is Harry's mom's, Lily's sister.
Don't forget Dudley.
And, of course, Dudley, their porky son. And so Harry grows up with these three individuals. Dudley's about the same age. And they are particularly horrible to him. I mean, the book starts out with describing just how much Petunia hates her sister Lily and everything that she stands for within the magical wizarding world. And they are pretty brutal to Harry, forcing him to sleep and locking him in for extended periods of time without food in a cupboard under the stairs filled with spiders. They are brutal to him. I mean...
Although that does go on to serve him later, the whole spiders thing. Why couldn't it be followed the butterflies? He's not scared of them like most people.
Absolutely.
Yep.
He befriends most spiders except for Aragog. That one doesn't go so well.
I mean, he tried.
He did. Absolutely. He was a total gentleman, but Aragog
not
wasn't.
So much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wasn't feeling it.
Goodbye, friend.
No, backwards. Dude, honestly, pretty tough line right there. Yeah. But regardless, the Dursleys were horrible to Harry, disgustingly kind to Dudley, and catered to his every whim. And that dynamic couldn't have possibly been easy for Harry to grow up with. I mean, one of the only birthday presents, or the best birthday present that
it was either birthday or Christmas that they ever got him,
was a 50 pence piece,
which Ron was so I don't know, fascinated with. He thought it was just so cool. Ooh, that's Muggle money?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can have it.
It's worth 50 pence.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it's worth. But still, the Dursleys are just horrible to him. So I think it's possible to say that they had a pretty horrible but also somewhat positive effect on Harry.
Albeit unintentional. I mean, they did let him live with them for 17 years.
Yep.
That was kind of the agreement that they had made. Remember my last from Petunia.
Yeah, it's not so much of an agreement as like accepting.
Yeah, accepting the responsibility of your dead sister's son.
Yeah, exactly.
And they did technically feed him and shelter him and give him clothes. They made sure he got an education.
Yeah, that's very true.
Albeit public school, so everyone's entitled to that, and they would have gotten in trouble with truancy laws and all that if they didn't. But
okay, yes, but
they did. And there's also the fact that Harry was a Horcrux.
Oh, yes.
And they were subjected to being in the presence of a Horcrux for about 15 years.
Straight.
And we all saw how nasty Ron got when he was wearing the Horcrux locket.
Right.
For maybe a day at a time or hours at a time. And we don't know if that affects Muggles the same way. But if it does, you might assume that's part of the reason why they were so nasty to Harry.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess the redeeming qualities there, the teensy bit of credit we could give them, old Dolores, is that, they in such a loose use of the word,
yeah,
cared for
cared.
In the most technical of senses.
They thought about him from time to time and
Yeah.
practiced minimal support. That's
Yeah,
that's a
I
bad
don't
word
know.
for it too.
Yeah, just yeah,
They didn't kick him or like
to the curb.
to the curb. They didn't
Yeah.
do that, so that was a win.
Don't think they didn't physically abuse him, because there is the time that Aunt Petunia tried to literally take him out at the head with a frying pan.
I did forget about that.
Yeah, literally tried to like shatter his skull with a frying pan.
Rough day.
Thank goodness he was so quick.
Right. But overall, I mean, I feel like we all know they could have been worse. So like
On a technical scale,
their redeeming
yes.
quality is that they weren't worse.
Weren't as bad as they potentially could have been.
As bad. And I feel like in some of the deleted scenes from the movies, they almost tried to redeem Petunia in that one scene where she says, you know,
I lost a sister as well.
Exactly, 16 years ago. But that's not even in the books.
That's not in the
Petunia
books.
is not meant to be redeemed.
Yeah. Dudley, on the other hand,
Yes.
was meant to be just a little bit redeemed.
Honestly, he was. And it was cut out from the movies, but
Even though
that
they filmed it.
they filmed it, and that scene
Yeah.
kills me.
I don't think you're a waste of space.
It's just
Thanks, Big D.
thanks, Big D. It's really, I mean, Harry saves him and then gets back to the house, and then there's this like cute little bond. Not really, but still.
No, that's when he's leaving. Like,
No, I know, but like,
Leaving.
I feel like that's what set.
well, what set it in motion was, the interaction with the Dementors, because
Right.
apparently what he saw when the Dementors attacked him was himself as the spoiled little bastard that he is. He saw himself as that, really crappy person, and that's what changed him around. So he actually started changing as of that book.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
That's bloody brilliant.
So at least he tried to redeem himself a bit.
Aw, I really love that. I do think Dudley was redeemed. I think he was
Yep, Dudders.
horrible. Duddykins. He was horrible, but to be honest, he was a product of his environment.
Yes, very much so.
Attempt to parent every now and again.
And then he goes on to the Queen's Gambit. Whoever saw that coming?
Right. Like who? I don't
I do
know.
find it ironic that the character or the actor who played him, his name was Harry.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
I mean, like, entertaining.
it is. So we'll jump into our next character, Gilderoy Lockhart. Harry. So he was the second year Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. He was the most useless, self-absorbed, narcissistic, and ridiculous individual in the franchise.
Ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
Exactly. Great.
But is that enough to hate him for?
Yes. Actually, yes, it is.
So
There's
he's
more
somebody-
we can hate him for,
Sure,
but
sure,
that
sure.
right there,
It's just
for
enough.
sure.
He's one of those people who, it's kind of like when you look retrospectively at what he's done, makes you go, wow, you were just like one of the worst of people.
Absolutely.
Because he took the credit for all these amazing achievements of other witches and wizards.
Right.
And on top of that, wiped out their memories. Like, just wiped them out.
Obliviated him.
Yeah, so some of which were like, they forgot who they were. Entirely. He also, was going to wipe out Ron and Harry's memory in the Chamber of Secrets, which he was going to flee from because he was a fraud, and they knew about it. And only didn't do that because Ron's wand backfired
Right, but he was going to wipe their memories
and let Ginny die.
and let Ginny die.
A defenseless, innocent 11-year-old girl.
Right. Like,
And I was too late to save her mangled body.
you two lost your minds at the sight of her mangled body.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
letting a child die,
Wiping out people's memories.
wiping out people's, and then also two children's
Memories.
memories.
Taking credits for the accomplishments of others and making an entire life and career built on that lie. Those lies. Yeah, just kind of the worst.
And funnily enough, none of those things are what I hate him for. I mean, those are bad things.
Yeah.
But just overall, his general existence is irritating.
Yeah, at best.
At best.
I'd agree with all that.
Like, the dueling club.
Yep.
What gets me is always, what a great idea to teach them that, Professor Snape. Although,
Excellent idea, Professor Snape.
if I do say so myself, it was pretty obvious.
What you were going to do.
Right. I like that right there. Just
Perhaps you should start by teaching them defensive spells.
to defend unfriendly spells.
Same difference.
No, not really. Anyway.
But if it weren't for that, Harry wouldn't have so soon learned his infamous
His trademark.
trademark spell. Expelliarmus.
That's very true. I mean, that was a good learning opportunity.
It was.
For sure.
Thanks, Snape. R.I.P. To Snape and Alan Rickman, of course.
Of course, naturally.
Does he have any redeeming qualities?
So, as a person, it's not necessarily redeeming, but it does shine a little bit of light on why he is who he is. When Gilderoy was a child, his father was a muggle, his mother was a witch, and he had 2 older sisters that were both squibs. So he very clearly became his mother's favorite. And in his home life, he was this incredibly special, fantastic little boy.
All that and a bag of crisps.
Exactly. And then when he went to school, he was quite shocked that he wasn't just as special.
Yeah, he was like super run of the mill once he got to school.
Because he was with all of the other witches and wizards, which is exactly what he was.
Not that he wasn't gifted at all. It's just
Right.
he let his ego get the best of him.
Yeah, and so it was always his ego, because his professors had said that if he had applied himself, he could have been, made something of himself.
Yeah.
But he had this habit of not trying or doing anything unless he knew he was the best in the room or the best in the group. And so that really held him back from honestly
Ever being anything great.
right, becoming good at anything. Like,
Yeah.
he could have made a name for himself,
Absolutely.
but
I think the other redeeming aspect to his character in the story, not necessarily to him, is that he serves as a warning to Harry. And this is talked about a lot in people who kind of go into deep dives about characters. But,
right.
the main question you ask when you think of Gilderoy is, why the bloody hell would Albus Dumbledore hire him, knowing he's a fraud, as the defense against the dark arts teacher? And it's because he's a prime example of what Harry could be if he really allowed himself to feed into the chosen one, the boy who lived, the only one to survive the killing curse.
Oh,
And he's
yes.
sitting in this room. If you let that get to his head and became a bit of a big head,
Right.
like Gilderoy Lockhart, then that's who he could turn out to be.
Right.
So it was really a lesson in what not to do, who not to be.
Which is a very important lesson to learn.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of people who need that lesson in life.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
But I feel like Harry picked up on that lesson pretty quickly.
He did, and I think he sort of displayed those qualities, at the beginning of the story with the whole Draco saying, "I can help you there, Potter." He was already well known enough and famous enough to attract the attentions of the Malfoy family, and he just said, "No, I think I can sort out the wrong kind for myself. Thanks."
Well, that's how he meets him in the movies.
No, but that whole dialogue happens in the movies as well. It just happens on the
books.
train. Sorry, in the books as well. It just happens on the train, not in the...
Well, that's partial. That dialogue is preceded by their interaction at Madame Malkin's, in which, Harry develops a deep dislike for him.
Harry didn't think he liked this boy. Yes, I remember Jim Dale saying that. Yeah,
Exactly. Of course you do.
but still,
Right.
he kind of he knows what bad character is,
Right.
And how not to be like that. So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
good. But this was a great lesson for him in terms of even adults end up this way.
Yeah, so Gilderoy Lockhart was overall annoying, actually did some really messed up bad stuff.
Did serve as some comic relief, which
Also served as comic relief.
was good because the first couple of movies kind of geared towards a younger audience. So it's good to have some comic relief there.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And basically, much like Dudley, he grew up to be exactly who we thought he was.
Yep. Next character, Percy Weasley.
Oh,
Let me take
Percival.
Percival Weasley.
Percival Weasley. So, for those of you who have seen the movies, it might be, and only seen the movies, it might be shocking that he is on our list, especially so early. But for those of you who have read the books, not shocking at all.
You'll know exactly what we're going for.
Oh, of course you will. Percy Weasley, in the first few both movies and books, is very clearly a rule follower, and he is very clearly driven to exceed his family's expectation and sort of status within the wizarding world.
Yeah, you could say he was on track to becoming a first-rate wizard.
Exactly,
Yes.
the point. So, in his pursuit and driven by his ambition, when the chance came, he took an internship with the Ministry of Magic. And this sort of put him in the perfect circumstance where when things started to really go downhill and the ministry needed some support, especially with those who were close to Dumbledore
And to Harry Potter.
they really latched on to him and continued to promote him, which made him loyal to the ministry.
Yes.
And that fact in and of itself is pretty much why he is so incredibly hated.
Yeah, so he ends up becoming really, really loyal to the ministry to the detriment of his family. And, he's constantly saying that, Dumbledore's a loony old wizard and he's off his rocker and Voldemort's not back.
He's not back.
And you're all crazy for siding with Harry on this. He's not back.
Right.
And that's because Fudge is not in his right mind. He's been warped and twisted by fear.
Being twisted and warped by fear. Now, fear makes people do terrible things.
And the terrible thing he's doing is ignoring the fact that Voldemort's back, even though he previously had sought the counsel of Dumbledore. And we'll get more into that momentarily. But this ends up playing off on Percy because he's sort of been groomed by the ministry to think the same way.
Very much so.
And it results on him basically disowning, if you will, his family for the position he has at the ministry.
Absolutely. And I mean, just things like, the scenes where Molly Weasley is crying, like anyone who makes Molly Weasley cry, you're off my list.
He's also one of the children she sees dead when the Boggart is in their house. Yeah. Another scene that was not in the movies that really should have been. That was a great scene.
I have been re-listening to the books.
Yeah.
Good Lord, I'm so excited. Anyway.
So how does he redeem himself?
So at the very, very end, he really pushed it. He does decide to join the battle at Hogwarts. He comes through the portrait hole in the Room of Requirement and meets up with the people that are in there. And
Doesn't Ginny bring him to everyone? She goes, "Look who I found."
I think so.
Yeah.
I think that might be in the movies.
I think she did in the books too, because she was told to stay there.
Oh,
and then
yes.
she didn't.
Right.
And I can't remember if it's when he came or before, but I know she ends up leaving the Room of Requirement because she was too young to fight.
Right. So he, eventually gets his head set straight, realizes, obviously, that Voldemort's back. He somehow finally comes to that conclusion.
He's back.
And then he goes to join the fight, reuniting with his family just before his younger brother dies.
Yep, Fred. I'm Holy Fred.
The Holy Fred. Anyway.
So he's certainly a dislikable character even before turning on his family because he's just such a pompous little wanker. But he did stand side by side with his family to protect Harry in the Wizarding World in the Battle of Hogwarts. And for that, we salute you.
Absolutely.
The next character we're going to talk about is
Mundungus Fletcher.
insert creature there. So Mundungus was kind of a crappy dude. He was a swindler, a cheat, a liar, and a first-rate coward.
Absolutely.
Although he was also part of the Order of the Phoenix.
He does have that one redeeming quality.
Yeah.
However,
we'll circle back to that.
Yeah, we'll circle back to the redeeming qualities.
Most people know him for the Battle of the Seven Potters.
Yep.
particularly if you've seen the movies, because he was one of the 7 Potters. So he was meant to drink the Polyjuice, or made to drink the Polyjuice potion, serve as one of the Potters, and was paired up with Mad-Eye Moody. He is also the reason that Mad-Eye Moody was killed during this Battle of the 7 Potters, because he disapparated out of fear. I believe didn't he see Voldemort?
Got one look at Voldemort and he disapparated.
Yeah, which obviously Harry couldn't do because he was underage and hadn't learned to apparate yet.
Right.
So they shot a bunch of killing curses at Mad-Eye and killed him. That was totally Mundungus' fault. We also see him later in the movies and hear about him later on in the stories when it comes to the locket.
Yeah, because one of the worst things that he does that really ticks me off is
He pilfers.
after he's responsible for Mad-Eye's death,
Yep.
he pilfers Grimmauld Place.
I love that word. Never get to use that.
He goes through and he ransacks it. He goes through everything and steals the Black family silver, and then he goes and sells it and pawns it. Like, you have to be a pretty bad person.
Blooming gave it away, didn't I?
Yeah, exactly. You probably should have had it all taken from you in the first place.
Yep.
But regardless, you have to be a really bad person to have worked with someone pretty closely for that long, been responsible for their death, and then go to someone else's house and just steal everything from it.
Yep. I agree.
He also is the reason that Harry gets attacked by Dementors. He is on watch with Mrs. Fig.
Yeah. You're right.
And
I forgot about that. Wow. It's been a while since I read that part.
And he decides to leave his watch because he needs to go do a cauldron deal because he's going to get a great deal on a bunch of these, like, cauldrons so that he can sell them. And in his absence, Harry gets attacked by the Dementors, and Mrs. Fig is like, I'm a squib. I'm here, but, like, I can't do anything.
I could just see them.
Right. I can just see them. So.
One of them was very tall.
And the other rather skinny.
Not the boys, the Dementors.
Thank you, Minister.
So, yeah, and he's just, generally speaking, a piece of crud. The other part that was kind of left out of the movies, though, which I'm hoping to see in the TV series, is the fact that there's this whole thing where Dobby and Kreacher pair up, which is kind of adorable. And they pair up and they are tailing Mundungus the whole time, because Kreacher tells Harry that Mundungus is the one who stole the locket. So Harry sends him because he's now the kind of willed owner of Grimmauld Place. And he sends Kreacher after him to tail him and get the locket. Dobby ends up finding out what he's doing, thought it was suspicious, tails Kreacher, and then they both get Mundungus. And I'm pretty sure Kreacher in the books hits Mundungus with a frying pan.
They weren't following Mundungus. Kreacher and Dobby were following Draco Malfoy because that's when he was still in school.
Dobby was. Kreacher was not, because Harry didn't trust him. If I'm remembering correctly, I don't think he trusted him. But he sends Kreacher to follow Mundungus, and then Dobby helped out too. So the fact that they both show up at Grimmauld Place with Mundungus was accurate to the books.
Right.
But I don't believe he sent Dobby to tail Mundungus. He sent Kreacher.
Right. I know he sent Kreacher to go get Mundungus for sure. I think they both tailed Draco though, because they would both come back and report to Harry.
I don't know if Kreacher did though, because he didn't trust him, because there was something to do with how Narciso could have technically been and Bellatrix could have technically been heirs to 12 Grimmauld Place.
I think it started with Harry didn't have any other option. And so Dobby was just like, I would love to help you. Please let me help you.
Yeah.
I'll watch Kreacher for you.
Anyway, I hope that whole storyline makes it into the show.
I agree.
Because I think it's adorable. And
so
it also,
storylines.
There was also like funny stuff in there that would have been great. So redeeming quality. You kind of came up with that one. I'll let you.
Yeah, so it's really hard to find. He really ticks me off. But one thing that I think redeems him a little bit is the fact that even, he wasn't traditionally friends with or close with anyone that was part of the Order in the original Order or the Order during that second go around with Voldemort. But Dumbledore ended up helping Mundungus out of a tight spot. And for that, Mundungus maintained a pretty sincere loyalty to Dumbledore. He joined the original order, he joined the secondary order, and even though no one liked him, no one trusted him, he still did his part, except for the apparating. He did his part. He provided a lot of valuable information because of his connections to the underground. And so to maintain that in a space where you were seriously disliked and mistrusted,
It's valuable.
I think that it's valuable. He also has the other slight redeeming moment, and he really only redeems himself in the eyes of Molly Weasley, who really has not liked him. But there is this one day where they're cleaning out Grimmauld Place and they open a cabinet and there is this cape that is strangling Ron, and it's Mundungus Fletcher who gets the cape off of him and saves Ron.
Yeah, there's that.
And so there are just like these brief moments and sort of the reason he was involved in the order that I do think contribute to sort of redeeming him, if you can.
So our next character, Lavender Brown. I think a lot of people are going to think it's weird we have Lavender Brown on this because, if this is the people we love to hate, hating Lavender might seem kind of strong.
I disagree entirely.
But we'll change your minds.
We hate Lavender Brown.
Lavender Brown, in my opinion, is one of those people who comes off as that, like, clingy, needy, obsessive, annoying person that we've all known somebody, either a girl or a boy, who is like this in a relationship when they're younger. And it's like, ugh, get a room, or just get a life, or just get away. And, and it's, it's those people who come up with annoying nicknames like One.
Gross.
Or who, like, make their girlfriend or boyfriend wear things they would never wear. Like the little necklace that Ron wears, my sweetheart.
No.
You wouldn't have caught me dead wearing that. Wouldn't have happened.
No, you wouldn't have.
And there's also the fact, for most fans, this was a big one that fans dislike. If you like look at some of the polls on like most disliked characters, a lot of fans really dislike her because of all the things I just mentioned, but also because she got under Hermione's skin so bad.
Oh yeah.
At this point in the books, Hermione had already started to develop a actual like for Ron.
Right.
And it was so apparent that she was peeved about Lavender being obsessed with him.
Right.
And like Lavender kind of came out of left field after Ron got on the Quidditch team and she became obsessive with him. And Hermione had always liked him.
Right.
And she wasn't at the point where she was able to buck up the courage, I think she had said to him during the Yule Ball, and ask him out or anything.
Right.
Maybe because she didn't want to change their friend dynamic, but in failing to do so,
right,
she gave an opening to somebody else, and that person took it.
Yes.
And people did not like that.
No, they didn't like it. I was reading something earlier where Hermione and Lavender weren't the best of friends when they started the same year anyway.
Yeah.
Like, their friendship was never really meant to happen, and I think that Hermione sort of rubbed Lavender the wrong way in that, she wasn't particularly acquaintous with the other girls and made friends with the boys instead.
Yeah.
But
she wasn't really friends with anyone. Nobody really liked Hermione except for, like, Harry and Ron.
Right. But, I mean, I think one of Lavender's worst moments is in the hospital when Ron's been injured.
I'm here.
I'm here.
One. Yeah.
You daft Dimbo.
I'm his best friend. I just so happen to be his
girlfriend.
Yeah. And then Ron says,
Hermione. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
which is awesome.
Right. And then she runs out crying. So I think that's the epitome of everything that's wrong with her.
Oh, to feel the cruel sting.
Right.
Yeah.
So overall, she's just someone, she's like Gilderoy. Just who she is and how she acts
and
is
how
what
annoying she is.
Makes, like, she doesn't do horrific things.
No.
But she's just so annoying.
She's an unbearable person to be around.
Right, exactly. And gets in the way of, like, the wrong people.
However, and you came up with this one too, you certainly can argue that she has at least one redeeming quality.
Yeah, absolutely. And
1.5, really.
Well, one is that she joined the DA originally.
That's the half one, in my opinion.
Right. She joined the DA originally. Even though she was skeptical about Harry's claim that Voldemort had returned, she joined it, and you could say that she joined it to get closer to Ron, but she did join it. And then when the DA sort of resurfaced closer to the war, she joined it again and then stayed at Hogwarts to fight against Voldemort.
And there's the one for me.
Right.
1.5.
And she did die in that battle.
Yeah, at the teeth, I guess, of Fenrir Greyback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She had been mauled and I think she had been mauled and then thrown over a banister. It didn't happen the same way. In the movies, you just see the camera cut to her and he's like over her neck. But it was like she was mauled and flung over a banister, and then I think she was attacked again. And it was actually really gruesome in the books.
Yeah, no, they weren't gentle.
Yeah, it was rough.
In any way whatsoever.
So she gave her life for the cause of the DA.
She did give her life for the cause. She joined the DA again, even though her relationship with Ron had ended. So I think that at her core, she was a good person. She was just unbearable. You can be good and unbearable. They can work together.
We've already talked a little bit about our next character.
Oh, yes.
Cornelius Fudge.
Minister of Magic.
Another widely disliked character amongst fans in the movies themselves and books themselves.
Right.
And personally, I really despise Cornelius Fudge. So he served as Minister for Magic largely during peacetimes.
Yep.
He came into the role during peacetimes.
And when he came into the role, it's basically because Dumbledore didn't want it.
Right, because everyone wanted Dumbledore for Minister.
Right.
But that kind of made him ill-equipped to deal with the troubles that he would soon come to find in the I guess initiation of the next Wizarding World War.
Right.
And that was because largely of it was largely his own fault. Because he ignored Dumbledore's advice, which is ironic because throughout the first few years, we hear about how Fudge often goes to Dumbledore for advice.
Yeah, he writes to Dumbledore.
Yeah, so I don't know if you would say that they were friends, but he certainly leaned on Dumbledore for advice and for counsel in terms of making some of the hardest decisions he had to make as minister.
Right.
And I think it's ironic that he ended up turning a blind eye to Voldemort's return and turning on Dumbledore in terms of his advice, and really kind of made going after Dumbledore his priority, because that's ultimately what bites him in the butt.
Right.
And leads to Voldemort coming back at full strength with all of his Death Eaters so easily.
Absolutely. It is.
Yeah.
I mean, not seeing it is what allowed him to do it.
Yeah.
And, there's the case that they all make is that the minister's mind is being twisted and warped by fear.
Yeah.
And fear makes people do terrible things. But
and to admit that Voldemort's coming back, he has to do something about it. And if he doesn't do something about it, but has admitted he's back, he's viewed as weak and inept.
He is weak and inept. But...
Which he ultimately proves to be, correct. But then if he does admit it and does do something about it, he could have been viewed as sort of a hero.
Right.
And they could have tentatively worked together and foiled Voldemort's plans much, much more quickly.
Very. Yeah. It could have gone so much better if Cornelius didn't give in to fear, and very quickly. It was the night of the last event of the Triwizard Tournament that Fudge was like, what has happened? We're going to cover this up.
Mm-hmm.
He decided right then and there.
Yeah.
And so I think he was afraid immediately.
And it makes no sense, honestly. If you think about it, okay, Harry comes back. He's with another child wizard who's dead. What's the explanation for him being dead? You make it through the maze and you grab the cup, which is a portkey, which I don't think was designed to be a portkey in the first place.
No.
And if it was only to bring you out of the maze into the entry point.
Right.
Why would he have the other wizard with him?
Right.
Why would Cedric have been with him? Because they wouldn't have reached it at the same time.
Right.
And he wouldn't have shouldered his dead corpse and like be like, all right, dead Cedric, here we go, let's grab the cup.
We're
And
gonna run
we're
together.
gonna run with your corpse around my shoulders, even though you're much, much bigger than me.
Right. This is
It
not
just-
gonna happen.
It doesn't make sense. So, okay, so you see this kid come back with this other dead kid, and you're gonna deny the only explanation that he gives
He's back.
for him being dead.
Right.
But if that's not the case, then Harry killed him. In which case,
Right.
why aren't you like investigating Harry for the murder of Cedric?
And if you did investigate Harry, you could do the last spell on his wand.
Yeah, you could elicit Priori and Cantartum, and you could see that he fought against Voldemort.
So I don't.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
No.
It's just like when they failed to investigate what happened to Peter Pettigrew.
Yeah.
Cornelius, not very good at your job
No. he's not.
overall.
So I guess I came up with this one, and it was a stretch.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's hard for
him.
Cornelius. His redeeming quality. I said that his redeeming quality was that he had a particular soft spot, which you may also argue is not a redeeming quality. It makes him weak as a minister, but a particular soft spot for Harry that really kept Harry out of trouble within the first few years, which was
Fair.
it was important to make the story move along. No,
Move the story along.
it was important because a lot of the things that Harry would have been in trouble with him for were either completely outside of his control or not him at all, like Dobby dropping the
Right.
violet
Pudding.
Violet pudding? Yeah. Anyway, it's a stretch, but I guess that's his redeeming qualities. He kept Harry out of trouble and
He kept Harry out of trouble, and he was really nice to Harry.
very nice. He was, yeah.
So I think that's important to note.
Rita Skeeter with that acid green dress.
The worst.
She is the worst. Rita Skeeter was a writer for the Daily Prophet and was most, I guess, commonly known for her like gossip pieces. She was kind of like a gossip rag writer
Yeah.
for the Daily Prophet, and she would write about famous witches and wizards and she would spill the tea on all of them. And she did have a very unique way of collecting information about people. We talked about that in a prior episode.
Oh, we did.
The dark side of some of our favorite witches and wizards. So if you haven't watched episode 9, definitely do that. But she eventually goes on to do much, much worse things.
Yep.
And she basically defames and really puts in harm's way by totally obliterating people's reputation using the Daily Prophet in some of her writings. So she continues to write these pieces about, the boy who lied, or Dumbledore. Is he daft or is he dangerous?
Dangerous.
And she kind of puts like a really, really bad light on those two,
Right.
getting fewer and fewer people to trust them about Voldemort's return, and therefore jeopardizing the safety of the Wizarding World more and more. And she's doing this at the behest of the Ministry.
Right.
I don't think you could really pull a redeeming quality out of the hat for this nasty witch. But this was a stretch. She does serve as another example for Harry in how sometimes things in the world around you are just not fair, no matter what. And even in, a community like the journalistic community, where there's supposed to be some integrity and where they're supposed to present the truth, that's not always the case. And it will be interesting to see how that plays out in the upcoming series, because I think, particularly in the US, we're seeing a lot of people who talk about fake news and don't
Right.
trust mainstream media or journalism. And so they'll go to other media sources, which may be just as inaccurate. But you see a lot of that now. So it'll be interesting to see how they incorporate that in the show.
Yeah.
And whether or not they're just gonna let it be as it is. And it almost makes you think that maybe J.K. Rowling had a bit of a time turner and she knew that this was something that, but in reality, this has always gone on in news where,
Right.
they would have, we would call it now, clickbaity titles to their articles, or, they'd have these splash articles that they want to make the front page. So they're going to make it as gossipy or crazy as possible. And sometimes there's a bit of untruth in those types of things.
There wasn't a bit of untruth in the article that she wrote for Hermione, though.
Correct. But that's because she was being literally threatened with her life,
Right.
if she didn't.
She was being threatened, but
Yep.
if we're talking about redeeming qualities, not necessarily as a person, but as a character in the story, her writing that article for the Quibbler
Yes.
did make it so that people finally believed Harry.
Yeah. That was a major turning point in terms of getting people on his side
Right.
about all this. Yeah. I agree with that one wholeheartedly. I wish you had brought that up earlier. Why don't you take the next one?
Peter Pettigrew.
Wormtail.
Feel like that's enough said, but we'll get into it. He betrayed his best friends. Who
I would have died.
would have died rather than betray my friends. Exactly. James, Sirius, even Remus were all very loyal to each other. They were all Gryffindors, and loyalty is one of those lesser known Gryffindor qualities. And they sort of allowed Peter to tag along with them.
They even
through
helped him to become
an
animagus.
animagus.
Yep.
And yet still he...
There's a lump of a boy who is following James and Sirius around.
Yeah, still, the little lump decided to lie to their faces in becoming the secret keeper.
Yeah, so Sirius makes him the secret keeper in his place. And he's been feeding information to Voldemort the whole time. They thought it was Remus originally because, people were prejudiced against werewolves.
Right.
And it was Peter because Peter always gravitated towards the biggest boy on the playground. And that to him, that wasn't Dumbledore, and it wasn't James, and it wasn't Sirius. It was Voldemort. And so he decided he was going to secure his safety by being disloyal to his
Right.
friends and loyal to the Dark Lord.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, he has always been and will always be a coward.
Yep. He even, after Voldemort died, tried to secure his position with an old pureblood wizarding family, the Weasleys, and lived as their pet rat for 12 years.
Yeah. I mean, like,
Kind of disgusting to think about it.
it's definitely disgusting. The eating, I think, is the grossest part. I mean, what, did he just eat cheese for 12 years?
He ate whatever they fed him. I don't know. I don't know what they fed him.
Yikes. Anyway, he just...
It's the worst.
He was an incredible coward, betrayed his friends, obviously caused the whole Harry Potter series.
Yeah.
So, like, low-key go off. But if we're talking about his redeeming qualities...
Yeah, so if you're talking about his redeeming qualities, there's a moment in Malfoy Manor. Well, actually, it's before that. There's a moment in The Prisoner of Azkaban where
Oh,
he ends up
yes.
sparing Peter's life in order to... He says, I don't think my dad would want his best friends to become killers, even for you.
Right.
And thank you.
Ugh.
James wouldn't want
Get
me
off.
dead either. So he ends up sparing his life, and when he gets away and he's talking to Dumbledore about it, he's actually very regretful for having spared Peter's life. And Dumbledore does say, Voldemort is not going to want one of his most loyal servants not beholden, but like indebted to his enemy, which is Harry.
Right.
And because Harry spared him, he now owed him a life debt, which for wizard kind is something you almost can't not act upon.
Right.
So when you owe somebody a life debt and you're there to be able to fulfill it, it's almost like you can't not.
Right.
And this plays out at Malfoy Manor when Harry and Ron are trying to escape the dungeon in the basement, or the prison cells in the basement.
Yeah.
Wait, you can operate in and out of here? Of course, I'm an elf.
Oh, Dobby.
I love that
Robbie.
sass.
Of course, I'm an elf. Yeah, he's
I'm
an
an elf.
icon.
So he ends up hesitating when it comes to like stopping Harry from leaving, and by then he has the silver hand that Voldemort had made for him.
Yep.
And we don't see it in the movies, but in the books, the silver hand ends up choking him to death. And Harry and Ron try to save him, try to pull it off, but they can't. And his larynx and everything is crushed, and he dies.
Right.
So he dies because he was disloyal to Voldemort, and the hand was kind of like enchanted that way. But he ultimately dies because he was loyal to Harry
Right. He was loyal to Harry and
for a moment.
for a very brief moment.
Yeah.
And there is also the moment in Prisoner of Azkaban where Harry's having his nightmares and Pettigrew does ask Voldemort, perhaps if we were to do it without the boy. And yes, there's a million reasons you could say Peter just didn't want to take the time to get Harry, but I think that there's a potential that underneath that, he didn't want to hurt Harry.
Yeah, so it's funny because the spell calls for blood of the enemy forcibly taken.
Yeah.
That literally could be anybody.
Right.
Because almost everybody is Voldemort's enemy. But obviously to Voldemort, the important thing is he needed to take in Harry's blood in order to take in the protective charm that Lily had.
So that he could touch him.
Touch you now. Yeah, so he needed to do that for that.
Right.
But then he kind of like reinforced the protection. He's dumb. Voldemort's kind of dumb.
Oh, he's wicked dumb.
Yeah, his inability to understand love and how it works within the magical world. He's just so dumb.
We'll talk about that someday.
We will.
Sure.
But that's Peter in a nutshell.
Peter.
It's Peter. Sorry. The next character, I'm sure many of you would expect to be on this list.
Dolores Umbridge.
Yes, Dolores Umbridge, perhaps the only character more hated than Voldemort himself.
Perhaps the worst character in all characters that have ever charactered ever.
And I think the thing that makes her the worst, is that she thinks she's a good person.
Right.
And she does the most heinous things in the spirit of doing what she thinks is right. Which is interesting because this in and of itself is the only reason she can produce a Patronus. Because a truly evil person can't produce a Patronus.
Troponus. I love Troponuses.
Yeah. Can't produce a Patronus.
Right.
And this is seen by, was it Urbo the Foul? I believe tried to produce a Patronus. He was a terrible, terrible wizard way back in the day. And when he did, it actually caused maggots to spew out of his wand that then came up and ate him.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so
it's a horrible story.
It's the worst.
It really is.
Yeah, so you can't be an evil wizard and produce a Patronus.
But she can.
But she can. And that's an important distinction because again, that sort of further roots the fact that she thinks what she's doing is just and right and good.
And her Patronus is a cat, right?
It is.
Of course. That was a dumb question.
And it makes it worse for me.
Let's talk about the things that she does.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of those things that makes her absolutely the worst.
Real quick.
So first of all, she's a complete bigot. She's all about purity and pure-bloodedness. And
spoiler alert.
And she's not a pureblood.
She's not a pureblood.
No.
So.
She's hateful. She's ignorant. Yeah. She's all these things. And she works for the ministry. And she inserts herself into the Hogwarts faculty as Defense Against the Dark Arts professor. And professors not to teach them anything at all. You mean we're not going to learn defensive spells?
You'll be learning how to use spells in a secure, risk-free environment.
But it's not going to be risk-free.
Who's going to hurt you, though?
I don't know. Voldemort?
Oh, right. But that's a lie.
Yeah.
And so she uses the black quill on Harry and then on pretty much everyone else.
Would you say what degree of shading does black fall into? Light or dark?
I'm pretty sure it's dark.
Yeah. So it's emblematic of the dark arts that she is essentially practicing on children.
On literal children.
Making them carve with their own blood, basically.
Their own blood.
Into their flesh with this enchanted quill during detentions.
Yeah. No, honestly,
literally one of the worst human beings ever.
Carving children.
Yeah.
Making the children carve themselves.
There are several things I'd like to say to you.
Also, she pisses off McGonagall.
I know,
Enough said.
Yeah. Because McGonagall is the salt of the earth.
Absolutely. McGonagall is everything. So
she's basically the worst in every possible way. She becomes the High Inquisitor. She has the Inquisitorial squad, which allows them to just be completely abusive of anybody they don't like. That also results in We talked about him in another episode. Montague, almost like dying, basically, when he gets shoved into the vanishing cabinet that's broken.
But yeah, so she carves children. She inserts all of these rules that make life horrible.
She was going to use the Cruciatus Curse on Harry.
She's going to use the Cruciatus Curse on Harry. Big red flag.
Bigoted towards the half-breeds, the centaurs.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Which, you know.
She comes to regret that.
Yeah, she absolutely does.
I always wondered what really happened when she was carried away. She freaks out when she hears centaurs.
But she does.
Or hoofs.
You know, I love that journey for her. But essentially, bad person.
She does end up helping Harry to fulfill his noble quest of tracking down the locket. Well, she doesn't help him, but she's an easier target than some random person he's never heard of.
Right.
When Mundungus Fletcher sells her, bleeding gave it away, sells her the locket.
He did give it away.
Yeah.
She didn't really give him a choice, though.
Bleeding bow and all. and she ends up in control of the Slytherin locket.
Yep.
And because of that, he's able to devise a plan to break into the Ministry as a different Ministry official with Hermione and Ron, and take the locket back, not without difficulty, of course.
No, it wasn't easy.
Yeah, and then they escape and yada yada yada.
But
so if she didn't have it, I think it would have been a much more difficult task to track down who did have it.
Right.
And therefore they would have been like lost.
Right.
In finding their first Horcrux that they needed to destroy.
Agreed.
Yep.
So overall, she's a really bad person, but I think that her redeeming quality is in the fact that she can produce a Patronus.
Yeah. She does think she's doing good.
Right. I mean, she genuinely believes that Dumbledore is putting together a force to take over the Ministry, and as the Ministry is law, order, and safety within the magical world, she feels as though that's threatened, and she does what she has to do, even if it goes against the minister, whom she essentially loves, to secure that. So
she needs to secure law and order.
Yes, exactly. Law and order.
Like a show.
Of course. But still, overall, the worst.
Yeah, absolutely worst character.
Yeah.
And of course, we're going to end on an obvious note of Tom Marvolo Riddle.
I think we might keep this one a bit short so we can talk about his stupidity.
Yeah.
Next time.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get back into Tom in future episodes.
Way in depth.
But Tom Marvolo Riddle, a.k.a. Lord Voldemort, is obviously seen as the main protagonist and the worst person in the series. He kills without any sort of remorse or...
Started killing as a kid, didn't he?
Well, at least torturing.
16?
Yeah. So, you're still a kid. And, I mean, he killed Hepzibah Smith. He killed some peasants and farmers in Albania. I mean, he was the one who resulted in the death of Moaning Myrtle.
Lillian James.
Myrtle Warren. Yeah, Lillian James. I mean, he kills tons of people.
Yeah.
And he also performed a ritual that is so dark and disgusting that J.K. Rowling wouldn't even actually tell you everything that went into it.
Right.
I suspect cannibalism.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in a future episode. And he's just like the most evil person possible. And this is all driven by his own insecurities and, I would argue, stupidity, because most witches and wizards live a pretty long time, like 170 years.
Right.
He made it to like 76 years old.
Right.
Dude could have just ate healthy, exercised a little bit, and not been a scumbag and lived more than twice as long as he lived.
So, yikes for you.
Yeah. Kind of dumb.
Yeah.
But yeah, all this was done to basically overcome death because he was so scared of death, hence the Death Eaters. And he created Horcrux by ripping his soul apart with these heinous acts and did further heinous acts during the ritual in order to create the Horcrux.
Yeah.
I don't think he's got any redeeming qualities at all.
No.
So instead, we're going to talk about might even say this, an excuse for his behavior.
All right.
You can't excuse his behavior, but maybe a rationale why he was like this.
All right. All right.
So, J.K. Rowling has written about this in multiple articles and talked about this in multiple press, episodes or press events. He was conceived under the influence of a love potion. Mm-hmm. So his mother, Merope Gaunt, had become infatuated or in love with Tom Riddle Sr., who was a muggle who lived in the town of Little Haggleton, where they lived. And he obviously, her love was unrequited. But that wasn't good enough. She was a wizard, and so she could help him requite her love.
Right.
And so she made Amortensia. Well, it's also been described that if a child is conceived under the influences of Amortensia, they unfortunately will not be able to love themselves.
Right.
Not love themselves, but they themselves cannot love.
Right.
Or understand love, which makes sense as to why he's so stupid when it comes to the power of love.
Right.
But that ends up resulting in him not being able to form any meaningful connections that would require that type of emotion to develop.
Right.
And so inevitably that results in his downfall. I don't want to get too deep into it because I think there's a lot more we can expand on there.
Right.
But that may be the rationale for why he's such an unremorseful scumbag.
Yeah.
And I guess you could say that's his excuse for his behavior.
I think it's definitely
rationale.
a contributing factor.
Yeah. With that said, I'm still glad he's dead.
Or is he?
That's true. I should go back and we should remake that video.
We should talk about it. We'll talk about it.
We will. So that's it for our list of characters. We did want to touch on a fun bit of news. There is a little bit of news about the franchise that has come out, and that is that there are writers now for submitting their proposals for the series. And so there have been 4 writers from the United States who have basically put in their bids to be part of the franchise, be like the screenwriter for the franchise. I'm not exactly sure what they'd be looking for. I'm assuming that they're saying, okay, I want you to adapt this chapter or whatever into a screenplay so that we can see how you would put this from the page to the screen. Because obviously, while they want to be 100% book accurate,
right,
and the entire story is already written for them, so they don't have to come up with that, transposing it into a screenplay does still require a fair amount of work.
Definitely.
For sure. And plotting out, camera angles and action sequences and what's going to be dialogue versus what's just going to be shown and all that kind of stuff. So it'll be interesting to see where things go with that. As far as I'm aware, they have now moved on to accepting proposals from UK writers. I don't know how many they're going to take. So they took 4 US writers' proposals or bids into the franchise. They're now moved on to writers from the UK and I think maybe also Europe. So we'll have to wait and see what comes of that. There's still no update on casting. There's still no update on a shooting schedule because obviously you have to cast and write and all that kind of stuff first. Yeah. But there's still no update on casting stipulations, whether or not they will require, which I believe they're going to because J.K. Rowling is fully involved in all this. Right. Whether or not they'll require them to be UK born and citizen actors and whatnot. But that's it for the updates on news. That's basically the only thing that's come out yet. But with the SAG strike being completely done and people really starting to get back into the swing of things, and HBO or Max really wanting to move this franchise forward, I suspect we're going to hear more soon.
Yay.
So we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you guys think that there are any characters we should have included but didn't, please leave it in the comments below. Or I'll put a little question on Spotify for those listening on Spotify, and you can leave it there. And otherwise, stay tuned so you never miss an episode. Make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, share it with your friends. And until next time, bye.
Bye.